All right, guys, when you're creating case studies, great visuals are a must. But taking photos of your work in real life is not always practical or possible. The clients don't always print your stuff. Now, this is where great mock-ups really come in handy. And the term mock-up is basically designer's shorthand for an image that depicts what your work would look like in real life. They're easy to create, they communicate your message effectively, and they're an affordable alternative to hiring a professional photographer. Now, let's be honest. If we're gonna make these things, we want to be able to reuse these mock-ups, or at least to be able to quickly swap out the artwork without recompositing the entire image. And the best way to do this in Photoshop is to use smart objects. So today I'm gonna teach you the way that I use smart objects to create reusable mock-ups. We're gonna cover some basic compositing tools and how to set things up to be reusable. Now, disclaimer, I am by no means a trained expert in Photoshop, but this is the easiest way that I've found to create these things. To start, you're gonna wanna find some great images or take them yourself. Me personally, I love Unsplash for this. Now, I wanted a challenge here. I wanted to do something cylindrical, but also something that had some perspective to it. So I found these glass bottles, which I think is gonna work great, hopefully. All right, so we're gonna download this and crack it open in Photoshop. Now, I want to remove the existing labels, but I also want to keep a lot of the texture of the paper there. So my biggest advice when you start working in Photoshop and start compositing is to work in layers and don't work destructively. This means don't commit your changes permanently to a layer. So you want to duplicate, duplicate, duplicate. All right, so let's start cleaning up these labels. Now, the spot healing brush is pretty amazing, so I always start there, and my biggest tip here is to work small. Set your brush size to like 20 or 30 pixels and really get detailed. Now, there will be areas where the spot healing brush just can't understand. Edges really throw this thing off. So you can use a combination of like the lasso tool to select the right color pixels, duplicate them, and then use masking or the eraser tool to create that surface that you're looking for, just like this. Now, in other examples or other places in the image, the spot healing brush just does not want to cooperate like these spots. So I'm gonna switch over to the rubber stamp tool and start covering the duplication tracks. By mixing up your tools, it looks a lot more natural. Okay, so keep in mind, this is your opportunity to make your job easier. You wanna fix any defects in the label or warping so that when you go to create your smart object and apply it, you're not gonna jack everything up or you're not gonna have to deal with these kind of imperfections at that point. So make your job easier later. Okay, so work your way through things using the rubber stamp, the lasso, duplication, and spot healing brush, just like I'm doing, until you're satisfied with your work. And I like to keep zooming in and out just to check things from a distance to make sure it looks natural. Now, your clients are never gonna be checking your pixels, like your pixel grid, unless you're working as a professional photocomper, but it helps to just be a little bit of a perfectionist here. So when you're happy with your now blank canvas, it's time to create your first smart object. Now, the size of your smart object is one of the most important things to get right out of the entire process. You want to create your smart object in the same size as the area in which you want to place your artwork or logo. Now, this can be tricky. There's a few situations that you don't really have to guess the dimensions and the aspect ratios. Like, for example, if your imprint size is the size of a sheet of paper, we all know that aspect ratio. Or if it's the size of a computer screen, we all know 1920 by 1080. So there are situations where you kind of know that aspect ratio. But in this situation, with this label wrapping around the bottle, you kind of have to guess. So for everything else, you're just gonna have to use your best judgment. Now, in this case, like I said, the wrapper is wrapped around the bottle, so we have to do a little trickery. So first, let me get the visible portion of the label duplicated on a new layer. Here it is isolated on black. Now, because it's wrapped around the bottle, if we were to unwrap it and lay it flat, it would be a little wider than what you see here. So use your best judgment and draw a rectangle with the shape tool that would best match the size of the label that's laying flat. Now, make sure that it's right side up, square to the artboard, and once you have that rectangle, duplicate it. You're gonna need the size later. Once you have that duplication, title the layer what you want to call your smart object, then right click and convert it to a smart object. Now, I want you to notice something. In your layers panel, the icon of that layer has changed, and you can see that your rectangle is now a smart object. When we convert objects to smart objects, we can think of them as containers. A smart object is basically a bucket where you can put a bunch of stuff into, and then you can edit the size and shape and texture of the bucket without changing its contents. All right, so let's take a look inside of our new smart object. So by double clicking, you can edit the smart object's content. And I'm gonna get rid of the pink and add some text. Now, once I hit save from inside the smart object, you'll know you're inside the smart object because you see .psb at the top of your Photoshop tab. I can navigate back to my mockup and start working on the smart object container. So you can see how it replaced the contents of my rectangle with text. It's pretty cool. So from this point on, we're really getting into photo compositing tips and tricks that are specific to this image, but it's important to recognize that anything that we do to the smart object container doesn't affect the contents permanently. That way you can double click, replace the contents with a different kind of logo or label as many times as you want, and the two things are not related. It's almost like the smart object container is a window to what's inside. So it's a beautiful reusable thing. All right, so let's go ahead and start comping our smart object into the scene here. Now, I like to start off by getting the orientation and perspective right. And the first step is to hit transform, which is Command T, and then rotate so our baseline corners line up. Then we want to make sure that our height is about right. Now, without applying our transformation, we can right click and change our transformation tool to warp. And this is a super powerful tool that will allow us to wrap the label around the bottle. So with this example, we know that the left side of the label is much more condensed than the right. So we move the warp handles in the grid to demonstrate that. And then we're also gonna bow the top and bottom of the smart object to match the curvature of the label. Now, one trick here is reducing the opacity of the layer a little bit can help you line things up perfectly. Okay. So once the perspective is squared away, it's cool to basically check our smart object and to switch things up just to see how it goes. So I'm gonna edit the content. Okay, so increasing the opacity, we can really tell that this thing doesn't belong. So let's start by adding lighting. Now, the best way to do this that I've found is to layer the existing lighting from your scene on top of the smart object. Okay, so I'm gonna command click on the smart object layer preview to select the shape of our now contorted smart object. I'm gonna click the photograph below it and then hit Command J to duplicate that part of the photograph. See, using the existing photograph to light your smart object allows the material's natural texture to come through, and it also allows the natural lighting from the photograph to shine. Otherwise, things kind of look fake. All right, so we'll hit Command Shift bracket to bring it up top, and this is our lighting guide. So to add shadows and tone, we can just set the blend mode of this new layer to darken or multiply. And that gives us our shadows. But notice that the highlights didn't really come through. Our blacks are not lit at all. especially where you can see that the label is kind of blown out. So notice by duplicating that layer and then setting it to lighten really doesn't help. And that's because stacking a darken layer on top of a lighten layer literally just cancels the two out. So all you need to do is set this new layer to a hard light and adjust the opacity to match the image below. Another trick is just to adjust the contrast so that the true highlights actually pop. Now, if you have highlights that are really just dying to blow things out, you can actually duplicate this layer again and then mask it out just to fit the image. So at this point, it really helps to refer to the original image. And this is why I keep telling you guys, duplicate, duplicate, duplicate. It's really great to just turn all of your layers off, check the original, and then turn them all on so that you can see how the new smart object looks on the original photograph. So you want to kind of analyze your work here. You know, what do the blacks look like? What are the highlights like? When I turn the smart object on, do the hairs on the back of my neck kind of stand up like, there's something weird? Take a look at your perspective again. Take a look at your transform. Take a look at your lighting. Those are the most important things. And then the next thing is just to make sure that the texture matches. Now, if you've drawn your lighting from the original photograph and layered the things on top like we've done here, it shouldn't be a problem. But there are some circumstances where a little bit of grain will help match the photograph. But the beautiful thing about smart objects is that you can layer everything on top of that bad boy and it'll be just fine. Okay, I think we should wrap up this tutorial. All right, right below this video, you can download the initial photograph and my edited and layered PSD file. Now, I challenge you guys to recreate my work shown in the video and then add new smart objects onto the other two bottles in the image. I've done this already in my Photoshop document, so you can kind of see and reverse engineer what I've done. Now, just a note, if you're not a Photoshop pro, start off with an easier image. I wanted a bit of a challenge with this one. There's round surface, there's a perspective to deal with, there's textures, there's weird lighting. I kind of wanted a challenge, so I went for it. But if you're just starting out, look for those images where you don't really have to mess with perspective or warping the smart object into place. A flat brick wall works great. All right, just to review, working with smart objects. Number one, clean up your image. Remove any unwanted markings. Number two, create a rectangle shape that's roughly the same size and aspect ratio as the space, your imprint area, where you want the contents of the smart object to show up. Number three, convert the rectangle to a smart object. It's now a container. To edit the contents, you just double click into the smart objects and insert your logo or image or texture, whatever you want to display. Number five, save and close the smart object tab in Photoshop. And number six, edit the smart object layer in your original document and comp it into the original photograph. When you're done, you have a reusable mock-up that you can use over and over and over again between clients and throughout the entire project. Just all you have to do is double click the smart object layer to replace the contents and you're off to the races. So I hope you guys learned a few things here. Thank you again for supporting us and I'll see you in the next one.